Guys, here's my analysis of Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman from the weekend. Let's get straight into it. So Leon Edwards does quite a good job in the first round of discouraging Usman from getting close enough to shoot for a takedown and just in general being hard to read. So he does this by doing a few things. One of the main things he uses is his switching of southpaw to orthodox, and each time he changes stance, it's like it's a new map, and so you've got to sort of readjust and make a decision depending on where their feet and their hands and their body are, all right? So each time he changes, it's like just a few seconds or fractions of a second to process for Usman of what the new map looks like. So he does a really good job of this in the first round, and also his feinting. And his feinting he uses as a way of making Usman not want to get close enough. It's like the whole time he's like threatening. It's like, be careful, you come close, I'll hit you, I'll hit you, I'll hit you. And he's like constantly showing that he's right on the edge of hitting it all the time. And this, I think, serves its purpose of keeping Usman just a little further away and just creating that little bit of indecision. Another thing that Edwards does quite well in the first round is he uses these long kicks. So, you got to remember that a leg is longer than an arm. So he's using the longest part of his body. And oftentimes he does some kicks up the center, but oftentimes he does these like low kicks down on the inside and outside calf, and sometimes like a side kick to Usman's thigh. And that's a really smart game plan, because you got to remember the first thing of Usman's body that's going to be coming towards him is his lead leg. So he's using his longest part of his body to attack the closest part of Usman's body. And like I said, it does do not a bad job of just sort of keeping him at that long range. For me, Usman's best punch is his jab. He uses his jab so nicely, especially for someone who's a wrestler first and foremost. His jab is just that to be envied by any boxer. And he actually struggles a little bit. And I think it is due to the fact that Edwards is using these feints and these looks so nicely that he struggles a little bit at first. But eventually he does manage to pop him with a nice jab, shoot for that entry against the cage, and he starts doing his usual cage wrestling tactics. I think Leon Edwards was pretty eager to show that he wasn't going to be bullied by Usman. And I think he wanted to make a statement that he could wrestle, and there's one point where he goes for this foot sweep, and he doesn't do too bad of a job of creating some off balance in Kamaru Usman, and immediately jumps to a front headlock, but just overcommits a little bit and ends up having to fall to guard and play from guard, where Usman jumps on top and then starts going to work with some ground and pound. One thing that Edwards did quite well from here was he used this scissor sweep to off balance Usman. I haven't seen that too much. I'm not saying people don't do it, but I haven't seen it too much in MMA. Usually what I see is guys on bottom using frames to try and create space and get up if they're going to get up. Or they stay in guard and go for submissions. Whereas Edwards used this scissor sweep and he actually, I wouldn't say nearly got him, but he definitely created enough off balance for him to be able to get up. So that was quite interesting, using some real, more of a classic jiu-jitsu technique in order to get up, rather than classic jiu-jitsu guys would just stay down in guard and keep on hunting for submissions. I think this is a good option. It's not a good idea to stay underneath Kamaru Usman and play guard. So I think this is quite a good option for Leon Edwards. Eventually they end up in this sort of 50-50 pummeling situation, and Edwards actually manages, like I said, I think he really wanted to make a statement with his wrestling. He manages to land an outside leg trip, falls straight into mount on top of Usman, and he remains in a controlling position for the remainder of the round. Eventually he switches to the back and he's just hunting for chokes. He doesn't manage to get it. Usman actually does a really good job of just keeping his centers offline and just defending the chokes. He does a really good job of that, which is correct. You don't, when you're attacking someone's back, you want to keep their spine in line with your center. And when someone's attacking your back, you want to do the exact opposite of that and constantly be trying to keep your center offline with their center. Usman does such a good job, in fact, of keeping the centers offline that it looks like right at the end of the round, it looks like he's about to spin inside of Leon Edwards' body triangle and end up on top. The buzzer goes, so this doesn't happen, but it just looked to me like he was just about to end up on top. One thing I thought that maybe Edwards might have been able to do to increase the likelihood of success of the choke would be throwing more punches. Perhaps the reason why he wasn't doing this was he might have been more concerned with control over trying to go for punches, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. But oftentimes creating multiple types of attacks can make you find the one, it's like, I want to distract with this so I can land this, which will come up again later on in this video. But if he had been punching here, he might have found it easier to, while he's defending that, bang, then slip in a hand underneath the neck. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. There might have been more going on than what I could see from watching. In round 2, Edwards goes straight back to using his long feints and stance switching again. But this round, Usman is showing a lot more urgency, and maybe he really wants to get some runs back on the board after being dominated the last couple of minutes of the round before. So showing that urgency, he really doesn't give respect to the feints like he was in the first round, and just manages to press him up towards the cage. And this seems to be the sort of common theme of the fight. Usman pushing Edwards towards the cage just by walking forward and pressuring him. Each time he pressures him, Leon Edwards tries to get some space by stepping back. Each time he steps back, Usman fills the space, and he just does this until they end up near the cage. And each time they end up near the cage, Usman opens up with either a big punching combination or a takedown attempt, or a combination of the two. Now, there are times when actually I think the commentators give Usman a little bit too much credit, because Leon Edwards actually does a really good job of blocking these punches. I know they were talking about how the big shots that Usman was throwing, but Edwards actually, I was really impressed, despite the fact that he is losing a lot of these rounds. I was impressed with his ability to just bring that guard up really tight. Occasionally a punch was getting through, but overall he's just blocking all of these big shots on his forearms and gloves. Despite the fact he's losing, I was quite impressed with his ability to defend like that. To me, the big momentum shift came late in round 2 when Usman landed a takedown, because Edwards had been actually doing quite a good job of just posting a hand and getting straight back up each time Usman attempted to take him down. But it was late in round 2 when he got this takedown, and to me that was the big shift in momentum, where it really seemed like Usman had taken control back of the fight. Round 3 just picks up right where round 2 left off, with Usman putting that pressure on and using the cage wrestling, and Leon Edwards is really not defending and getting back up the way he was in the previous rounds, and those stints of control on the cage and ground are just getting longer and longer each time. Edwards does have a couple of moments here and there, like there's one point where he actually manages to get some control time with pressing Usman against the fence, and he sort of has a rear body lock, but Usman just stays patient, fights the hands, breaks free, and then like a few seconds later just shoots a takedown and gets that respect immediately straight back. This is basically the narrative of the fight for the remaining couple of rounds of Usman just pushing that pace, using the fence, getting him down. If he gets back up, he's just everywhere. He's all over him like a rag, and there's just not much of an answer coming from the way of Edwards for Usman's wrestling. In round 5, Edwards actually gets, and I'm not sure if it's something that his corner had said to him, or he's just realizing that he needs to start fighting with some urgency and desperation as the clock's running out. But he's got some pep in his step. He's back to feinting well, and he's even initiating some punches. Before he wasn't really punching, he was just feinting, the occasional long sort of frame jab, not a real committed jab, but lots of feints and these sort of kicks. But he never really threw many punches throughout the whole fight up until round 5, when he's initiating some punches, which I think is the key. Your feints work when you're actually punching. If you're just feinting, never punch, your opponent goes, oh, he's just feinting, he's not even punching, and they don't respect your feints anymore. So I think this was a key ingredient. Edwards is showing that he's not giving up. Like Usman tries to take him down, he's back to posting with that hand and immediately popping straight back to his feet to not allow Usman to just get on top and ride the clock out. A lot of the time when someone's been beaten for the last 3 or 4 rounds in a row, they're sort of almost like resigned to the fact that they're going to lose, but it clearly this isn't the case for Edwards. He's still fighting at this point. As I said earlier, the fact that he's throwing punches are making his feints work again in this round. And he even manages to start backing Usman up. He was unsuccessful at getting Usman on the back foot throughout this fight, throughout pretty much the whole fight. But now he starts feinting, and then even a few times Usman starts to retreat a little bit. Now, like I said, I think this is due to the fact that he's finally throwing some punches. After a few feints and switches in round 5, Edwards settles into a southpaw stance. He feints a jab, throws out a left cross, and then immediately brings up this left head kick, and the shin right wraps straight across Usman's jaw and immediately knocks him out. And it is one of the most dramatic things I've ever seen in a world title fight. Just something about, almost like in the way of when Weidman beat Anderson Silva, where Silva had just been such a dominant champion for so long, and we knocked him out. It was, so dramatic in the same way, because Usman was just so dominant as a champion for so long. In this fight, he'd been dominating him in the last couple of rounds, and it looks like Edwards is almost just out of the fight. Managing to land that head kick would just added to the drama. It was just one of the most spectacular knockouts I've ever seen. The way Edwards threw the combination was extremely effective. So when you throw a jab, cross, rear kick, it's usually jab, cross, especially if you commit to throwing the right hand. If you're trying to land that right hand, the timing is different. It's jab, cross, and then you kind of have to wait for your center of gravity to settle back into your stance again. 1, 2, kick. And it's almost like this skip, this gallop up to throw the kick. But the way Leon Edwards throws it, he throws a jab, the cross is just thrown out to hide the kick, so he doesn't actually try and commit to it. And this allows him to be 1, 2, kick, and not 1, 2, kick. If he hadn't committed to that left hand, he would have missed the opportunity. He would have gone 1, 2, and by the time he'd thrown the kick, Usman's probably had enough time to regather, see it coming, move out of the way. So, yes, I thought that's just worth pointing out that technique he used was so appropriate. And I think this is it's almost a whole concept that needs an in-depth video, probably done by someone else who's got more time than me. But the concept of distracting and then throwing your real shot immediately after the distraction is something that can be so well utilized, and it's so underutilized in striking, especially in the UFC. You remember, these guys aren't strikers, they're MMA fighters. Some of them may be more striking specialists, but they're MMA fighters first and foremost. So they may not use the art of feinting as well as, say, some of the best boxers in the world. They're good, don't get me wrong, but not on the same level as the best boxers in the world. I think the way that many MMA fighters use feints, and this probably comes off the back of the guys like Israel and the city kickboxing fighters who really, I really feel like they brought feinting to the forefront of people's minds in MMA. But they're using them a lot of the time, especially Israel. They're using them in the same way Leon Edwards used them throughout this fight, which is a way of discouraging their opponent from coming forwards, and not necessarily as a distraction to throw their real shot, right? So a lot of time it's don't come close or I'll get you. So it keeps their opponent further out. And when they shoot, they have to shoot from a further range, and it's much easier to see coming. So that's the reason why I think that the city kickboxing guys use the feints in that way. Whereas what Leon Edwards threw was feint as a distraction, look up here and I'll hit you down low. So I just want to point out the difference between the two, because there are different feints for different reasons, and Leon Edwards used both of them in this fight. A fun discussion off the back of this is how long is Leon Edwards going to remain champion for? And who's next? Because the two obvious names that come to mind is Chimaev and Colby Covington. And we don't really know how good Leon Edwards' wrestling is at the moment, because the only indication we have is him against Kamaru Usman, and Kamaru Usman is a freaking good wrestler, so it's not a very fair indication. We saw flashes of it, but you don't really know how good Leon Edwards' wrestling is. And both of those guys are a real problem when it comes to wrestling. So it's likely they're going to be giving the same sort of problems to Leon Edwards as Kamaru Usman did. And just for fun, let's imagine the possible scenario of Leon Edwards versus Conor McGregor. So whether or not Conor McGregor deserves a shot, it would just imagine the hype that would be built around a fight in the UK somewhere, maybe in Ireland or England, or anywhere in that region between the two, because those guys, those fans in England and Ireland and Scotland, well, they travel. They, even in Australia, we have the Palmy Army come over to support their English, and they travel thousands of kilometres in order to come and watch them for a couple of weeks at a time in the cricket. They'll travel. So imagine having UK, a mega fight between Conor McGregor and Leon Edwards. And I think it'd be actually a really good thing for Leon Edwards' profile, having someone like Conor McGregor to bring that fame to him. It's like almost like with Khabib, him versus Conor is really what brought Khabib's name out. The fact that he was a fantastic wrestler and such a dominant figure in fighting wasn't enough. They needed the drama, and I think Conor could definitely bring that. So imagine if Conor beats Leon Edwards, and imagine Conor wins. And then imagine Conor gets to fight Colby Covington, and just the absolute shit talk and banter that would ensue in the build-up process. It kind of makes me hope that all of these imaginary scenarios actually do happen. So as usual, guys, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Really helps us out with the algorithm, and give us a comment while you're at it. Let us know what you thought of the fight and what you think might come next for Leon Edwards. Like, who's he going to fight? Will he win? What are the big problems he's facing in the future? So hope you enjoyed it, guys, and we'll see you in the next video.